It's great to be here and spend a few minutes with you today. So a few months ago, I was in Cache Valley. I was visiting some of the organizations we work with there. And as most of you know, they've been in Cache Valley. There's a main road that runs all the way through Cache Valley. It goes from Hiram all the way up into Idaho. And this one particular afternoon, it was right around lunchtime. I am in between Hiram and Logan, and I'm just about getting into Logan, coming down this road, and there's 2 lanes of traffic going each way, plus a left turning lane. And I pull up to the stoplight to turn left, and there's a guy in front of me in a Ford Ranger, and there's the traffic that's still coming this way, and he pulls out into the intersection, and I'm right behind him, and we're just waiting for traffic, waiting for the light to turn. We sit there for a while, and the light turns yellow. And the first lane of traffic stopped, and the gentleman in front of me in the Ford Ranger goes ahead to turn left. What he didn't see was that the outside lane of traffic had a car in it that was not intending to stop. In the Ford Ranger in front of me was a kid. He was probably 18 years old or so. The car that was coming that he did not see was a smaller SUV with an older couple in it. He began to turn left. That older couple at 45 miles an hour slams into him. Both of their cars go veering off and then proceeded to hit other cars that were in the intersection planning to go across. Now I'm right behind the guy in the Ranger, and you know, a million thoughts go through your mind, right? Your anxiety instantly increases, and I realize that I need to help, right? But there's a split second in my mind where I'm trying to kind of brace myself for this, because you don't know what you're going to find sometimes in an accident. And I'm not a medical person, but I knew I needed to help. So I leave my truck in the intersection, I throw it into a park, I jump out, and I start walking to the guy in the Ranger. He's the one that's closest to me. The SUV had kind of veered off and was headed down the road as it hit a couple of cars. So I walk over to the guy in the Ranger, and I try to open his driver's door, and the driver's door is jammed. It won't open. And I can see him trying to move around inside of the truck. So I walk around the back side of this truck, and I go to the passenger side door, and I open the door as I can see him struggling to get to the passenger side door. As I open the door, he falls out of the truck and lands literally on my feet. And I'm talking to him like, hey, buddy, don't move. Everything's going to be okay. Just hold still. Just don't move. Because I don't know how bad he's hurt. Not sure what's going on exactly. And he's on my feet. And so I don't move. And so I kneel down with him, and I put my hand on his shoulder. Now, I don't know this guy. Never seen him before. He doesn't know me. And all I did until medical authorities arrived was just talk to him with my hand on his shoulder, hoping that he would feel a little bit of comfort just because someone was there, someone that was hopefully showing some concern. So I stood with him for a while. And I was telling him reassuring things. Hey, don't worry. It's going to be okay. We got people coming. And as you can imagine, there's chaos going on all around us, right? You've got multiple cars involved in the accident. There's people that are coming up to me, and they're like, okay, what do we do? And I'm like, and I'm trying to talk. I'm consoling this guy. I'm talking, tell him to call 911. And I'm like, is someone with the other couple in the other car? Anyway, it was a chaotic scene. And there was a time there, though, when everybody was kind of getting some assistance, and I was able just to sit with this guy for a little bit. And I could tell not only was he in pain, but he's emotionally struggling too. It would be hard. And he's young. And so I stayed with him until medical personnel arrived. Fortunately, it wasn't that long of a wait. There happened to be an EMT that was driving by that saw the accident and got out to provide assistance. And of course, began to ask him, who do we call? And he said, can you call my mom? So we called the mom. His mom came. Ambulances came. They ended up taking some people to the hospital. After all the chaos was kind of done, I spent some time with the police, and they were asking me questions, as you normally would do. And I got in my car, and as I was leaving the scene, I was just kind of reflecting, right? Because when you have something like that happen, you think about it for a long time because it kind of gets your emotions going, your anxiety, and you're kind of replaying in your mind what happened. Now, I want you to think in your own mind, what if it was you that was in that situation? Hopefully, all of us would jump out of our car and help. But what about the alternative? What if I would have stayed in my car and sent him a text message? Hey, man, hope you're doing okay. Let me know if you need any help. Or just did nothing. Now, I recognize that that might be a little bit extreme in regards to what we're talking about today. But we spend quite a bit of time talking about what do we do when we're struggling with mental health. But what I want to talk a little bit today about is what do we do if it's our friends or family or loved ones that are struggling with mental health? What do we do? And really talk about what are the practical things we do. Because sometimes we, I think, talk in what we think the ideal situation is, and here's how you're going to handle it. Things don't always work that way. It just doesn't always pan out that way. But there are going to be those circumstances where we might be the ones that show up to an accident, and we need to be the ones to respond. And how do we do that? So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So this here is an acronym. It's BELIEVE. This was created by a guy named Chad Buck. He's a psychologist. And he talks about when you've got someone that you know or care about that is struggling with suicide, what are some things that you should have going through your mind? And so you can read through these, and we're going to talk a little bit more about these. But he talks, first of all, we need to believe that what they're saying or the things that they may be indicating are real, and that we need to take them seriously. One of our roles when that's the case is then to begin in those conversations, to really engage with them and help them. And we're going to talk about how to do that. And then to listen without judgment or arguing, and then investigate what their intent is, and then express empathy for that individual, validate how they're feeling, and then encourage them, okay? And I'll talk a little bit more about most of this. Some of you have already been in these situations where you've had an individual who was struggling, and you were the one that was tasked with going through this. Sometimes we are afraid to have the conversation because it's scary or it's something we're uncomfortable with. And I believe that there's multiple reasons for that, but sometimes I believe it's because people think if I engage in that conversation, I'm expected to solve the problem. I will tell you right now, that is not the case. No one expects you to solve the problem. Your role is to be a support. That's what it is. So don't ever be afraid to talk to someone because you're worried that now I've got to figure out how to fix it. Now, for many of us, that looks different depending on the situation. So let's say that we've identified someone, we've got a friend, they've made some comments, they're making us nervous, there's some things going on in their life, or maybe like the example Brandy gave earlier, we had no reason to believe there was something going on, they just happened to ask, like the father. We need to be thoughtful about that conversation. And when we can, have that conversation in a place where you can be uninterrupted and you can have a thoughtful conversation with them. Now, a part of that conversation is going to be asking direct questions. And Brandy touched on this as well a minute ago. Sometimes we think, if I ask someone if they're considering suicide, I might be putting thoughts in their minds they would not otherwise have. I will tell you right now, that is wrong. It's just not true. It is not true. It is much better to ask the direct questions than to think that you may be causing a bigger problem by asking the questions, because it's not true. So please, even though it's scary, ask the hard questions. Ask the hard questions. Chances are they are only going to help, and they will not be offended by your taking that opportunity to ask those questions. Now, the last thing it talks on here is about being non-judgmental. I can tell you, if you're in that circumstance, You're less likely to help someone if they feel like you're just there to tell them that they're crazy about the way they're thinking. I'll give you an example. Just on Sunday, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine. He's a neighbor. He's having some struggles. He's having a hard time, and it has been for a while. He's got some what we call thinking errors going on. And the hard thing for him is he knows very well he's got thinking errors. He knows it, but he doesn't know how to fix it. That's the hard part. The hard part's fixing it. And so he doesn't need me or anybody else to tell him, hey, you're kind of messed up in the way you're thinking. That's just not right. He already knows it. Rather, we need to say, hey, let's talk about it, and let's see if we can get some support and do some things to help you. You know, and for me as a neighbor and a friend, that might simply be taking him to lunch once in a while and sitting down and just talking about it. The cool thing is, when you've had that conversation with someone initially, they're more willing to talk to you after the fact. Whereas otherwise, they're probably afraid to talk. The other day, I was doing a presentation similar to this, and I was talking to an executive there who has responsibility over, it's kind of like a collaborative of large companies. And she has had her own mental health struggles. And she was telling me that she was surprised at how often when she would mention to someone that she considered a friend or a family member that she was having mental health struggles, that the conversation would kind of abruptly come to an end. Or they would kind of look the other way or try and change the subject. And once again, she was not expecting them to solve her problems. She just wanted to have a conversation with them and tell them, hey, I'm having a little bit of a struggle here. I hope that as we reflect inside, that we're not the ones that turn away or try and change the subject. Rather, ask questions. Find out what it is they're struggling with. Once you find that out, and we'll talk in a second about what do you do about it, right? Because like I said, you're not supposed to solve everybody's problems, but you can still be a good listener, which is what we're going to talk about next. What does it mean to be an active listener? You've heard this before. I have a good friend of mine who is one of the best listeners ever. And because of that, I love interacting with her. Like, she looks me straight in the eyes. It's very clear that she's interested in what I have to say. She's asking questions about what I'm saying, and she's engaged in the conversation. And she's just also one of those people that's just generally happy all the time. You were talking about. She's one of those. She's awesome. Everybody loves her. But she cares about people. And I think it's because she's so good at being an active listener. And we can practice that as well. We have opportunities to practice active listening all the time. Just last night, I'm sitting on the couch, and I'm doing something on my phone. It's like 9:30 at night, and my 15-year-old son comes up to me, and he's telling me something about a new video game that's being released. Okay, I'm not a gamer, and I don't care about video games, but I care about my son, right? And so for me, I needed to take whatever I was doing with my phone, I don't remember what it was, put it down, and actually listen to my son. And that kind of thing helps me build a relationship with him, so that if he's got a conversation he wants to have with me and it has nothing to do with video games, he's more likely to engage in that conversation because he knows that I'm going to put down whatever I'm doing to listen. Now, I'm not always great at that. I'm trying to act like I'm Father of the Year. I'm not. But sometimes as parents or friends, we need to make sure that we're putting aside whatever we've got going on so we can listen to somebody. And the sad part is you never know who it is that might be struggling. It can be anybody. If you look at the statistics, the last numbers that were published in regards to suicides that happened, I think it was 2021 data or 2022, men are 4 times more likely than women to take their life by suicide. Now, that doesn't mean we forget about the women and they've got it all together. They've got their struggles too. But sometimes the men do a really great job of hiding it. One of my best friends, I talked with him a couple weeks ago because I heard something crazy was going on in his life, and it was. He has a brother-in-law who, by all standards, as most people would consider, had a very successful life. He's in his early 50s. He's an orthodontist. He'd built a very successful practice. He was very financially stable. He had a loving wife and a great relationship with her, and loving kids and a great relationship with them. And his plan was to retire this summer at an early age. And he took his own life 3 weeks ago. You can imagine the devastation to that family. And as I was talking to my friend about the circumstances, you could feel the burden that family was carrying. And there were probably a lot of them saying, if only I would have done this. You know, we all say that, right, when something happens like that. And they knew he was struggling because he'd been struggling for a few months. And you always are going to be wondering if you ask the direct questions. Or were you a good listener? And I'm helping him to understand you can't blame yourself. But the scary part about this was, so there's another one of our best friends. The three of us spend a lot of time together. We do a lot of hobbies together. I was talking to the other friend on my drive home. It was 9 o'clock at night or so. And he's like, hey, I just got off the phone. I was just talking to so-and-so this afternoon. And he was saying some things that got me worried. Kind of like, now that my brother-in-law has died, I'm not sure if I want to do this. And this friend of mine, I'm like, whoa, what did you say? He's like, well, I didn't really know what to say. I'm like, I need you to call him back right now. I need you to ask him some questions. I said, you got to ask him, are you considering hurting yourself? And I said, I need you to call him right now. I need you to call me back. And so he did. He called him, he talked to him, and he called me back. And he's okay. But I don't know if he would have happened had he not asked that question. We'll never know. And that's okay. Hopefully he's okay. But I'll tell you what, though, I'm going to be checking in with that friend more than in regards to his own individual mental health than I would have in the past. And it's simply because you're asking some questions, you're showing some sympathy. You never know who it might be that's struggling. So please don't miss an opportunity to be the one that supports somebody. Okay? So we talked about asking direct questions. This is super important. Take the time, make it a priority. So here's what we do about it, okay? So we've identified, we've talked with someone, they're struggling. What do we do? As I said earlier, it's not your responsibility to fix them. But what is your responsibility is to help connect them to someone that can help them. If they are answering questions in a way that makes you feel that they are having some struggles, that they may be considering hurting themselves. The great thing is there are a ton of resources available. The hard thing is sometimes it's hard to know where they are and how to access them. Brandy's got her own stories about that. And that's one of the reasons Promise2Live is in existence. There are resources available. If you go to Promise2Live website, it talks about some of those, and we're working actually on adding even more, making that bigger and better. There's always 988. That's an option as well. Your responsibility, especially if it looks like there's an urgent concern, is to stay with that person until you get them connected to someone that can help. You don't want to leave them alone. Now, I recognize this is a hard conversation. These are not necessarily fun things to talk about, but I think they're important. And as we see it becoming more and more prevalent, it's more and more important that we're talking about it. The good thing is more and more people are willing to talk, which is great. And that's why you're here, right? So thank you for your willingness to be here. Now I want to talk for a minute about what Promise2Live can do for you. We've talked a little bit about that already, but I want to add my experience. My first exposure to Promise2Live happened in January of this year, so it was just a couple months ago. Actually in a town hall just like this. I was here, I got an invitation, and I thought, well, I'll go check it out. So I came, and I got a pocket hug too, right here. So I went home. I learned from Brandy. She shared her experience during that meeting. I went home, and I still had my pocket hug with me. And I'm one of those that kind of likes to fidget with things anyway. And so I'm fidgeting with my pocket hug as I'm sitting at the counter. We have kind of like a bar in our house. And I'm looking at this, and my wife is there, and my daughter is there. And I'm like, wait a second. I made a promise today. My wife and daughter need to make that same promise. You know what? So does my whole family. So my son was upstairs, my youngest. I've got 2 kids that still live at home. My other kids have moved on. Well, they're still part of our family, but they're not in our home anymore. And So I called down my younger son. I'm like, hey, buddy, you need to come down. He was upstairs. He came down, and he had one of his friends that was with him as well, one of his best buddies. And I didn't care. We were doing Promise to Live, even with the friend. So I told him all what it was. I showed him the coin, and I made him do a verbal, out loud promise to live. We all did it together right there in the kitchen. So as we talk about these things that are sometimes hard to talk about, but we all know are worth talking about, that's why we're here. My challenge to each of you is, we've talked about you all getting a hug, and Brandy mentioned getting a second one. My challenge to you is, before the end of the week, to at least have 2 other people that you've been able to get them to make the promise as well. And I don't think you'll find that it's that hard, really. It's pretty simple to say, hey, I went to this thing the other day. It was really cool. And one of the things they talked about was this Promise to Live thing, and here's what it means. And it's not really complicated, as Brandy explained. It's like, I promise that when things get hard and dark and sad or depressed, I promise to live. And I'm going to seek resources and help to make sure that I do that. So that was my challenge for you. It will pay off. I can tell you right now, when I have the opportunity to help someone that might be struggling, it feels good. And it feels good when we're talking to our friends or our family and we're encouraging them to make the promise to live. So with that, thank you, and I appreciate you letting me come spend some time with you today.